today what we're going to look at is an introduction to IELTS, the whole IELTS exam, not just the writing portion but the whole exam. So a warning before we begin: if you have knowledge of the IELTS exam, if you have an understanding of it, you know how it works, you know how it's structured, then you can skip this lecture. You won't be missing out on anything. It's just for those students who have not done the test before, they're not very confident about the structure. So if you have done the test before, you know exactly how it's structured, then just skip to the next lecture. So for those of you that don't know much about the IELTS exam, then this lecture will bring you up to speed. So what is IELTS? IELTS is an acronym and it stands for the International English Language Testing System. IELTS. It's not IELTS. A lot of students confuse that with IELTS. It's IELTS, I-E-L-T-S. It is the world's most popular English language proficiency test, taken by millions of students every year. In fact, over 2 million tests are taken every year at the current rate, and it's rising all the time. It assesses all of your skills in English: listening, reading, writing, and speaking. And it is an exam which is accepted by schools, universities, employers, and immigration authorities. But how is it structured? So here what we have is a general walkthrough. This looks a little bit intimidating, but we're going to take it a piece at a time. First of all, IELTS is separated into 2 modules. So you can either choose the academic module or the general training module. It really depends on your requirements. Often when you are applying for university, then you need to be doing the academic module. While if you are applying for visas for English-speaking countries, particularly with certain types of work, then you'll probably need the general training. Now, in this course, we are focusing on task 2 in the writing, and it doesn't really matter if you're doing the academic or if you're doing the general training module, because in both modules, in task 2 of the writing, we do an essay. Yes, the questions are slightly different. Yes, your approach can be slightly more informal and casual in the general training, but everything that we look at in this course is going to be relevant to both modules. So let's have a look at the exam itself. The exam starts with the listening component, and in the listening component you have 30 minutes plus 10 minutes for transferring your answers, and you have 4 sections. There are 10 questions in each section, which makes up 40 questions altogether. Some important points to keep in mind: only use a pencil, and remember that the audio is played once only. It will not be repeated for you. After the listening comes the reading test. You have 1 hour for the reading test, although you should try to save 10 minutes at the end for transferring your answers to the answer sheet. There are 3 sections and there are 40 questions divided among those sections. Again, answer in pencil only. After the reading test comes the test that we're interested in, which is the writing test. Again, you have 1 hour for the writing, and they recommend 20 minutes for task 1, where if you are doing the academic writing, then you will be describing a graph or a diagram or a process or a map. And if you're doing the general training writing, then you will be writing a letter in task 1. And then they give you 40 minutes for task 2, which is the essay. So 2 tasks, 2 questions, 1 question in each task. Some important points. For task 1, the minimum word count is 150 words. There is no maximum, but as we will speak about, it's good to try and keep it as close to the minimum as possible. So 150 words in task 1 and 250 words minimum in task 2. Finally, the speaking exam. This takes roughly 11 to 14 minutes depending on your answers and depending on the examiner. There are 3 parts with no set number of questions. and in part 1 you will have a general casual interview, some pretty basic questions about your work, your education, where you live. In part 2 you will have to speak about a particular topic for 1 to 2 minutes, and then in part 3 you will have a discussion about that topic. It gets progressively more difficult as you go along. So that is the IELTS exam in a nutshell. And how is it scored? Firstly, there is no pass or fail in IELTS. If you ever hear me talking about passing the exam, all I mean is that somebody has got the score that they require, or that they haven't, in which case they fail. But of course there is no fail in IELTS. You are graded in each component, and the average gives you your score. So let's imagine you have a 6 in listening, a 7 in reading, a 6 in writing, and a 7 in speaking. So your overall score is a 6.5, as that is the average of all 4 components. IELTS scores are valid for 2 years after certification. Keep that in mind when you are applying for immigration or applying for universities. Some people forget about that. If you know your CEFR score, C2, C1, B1, B2, then you can apply it to this little table here where you can match up your expected IELTS band score with your CEFR score. Finally, IELTS score requirements. Different institutions require different scores. So look at this as a general guide, not as a comprehensive and perfect guide. So, in general, a 5.5 to a 6 will give you entry to a university foundation course, while a 6 to a 6.5 will give you entry to a bachelor's degree course. A 6.5 to a 7 may give you entry to a master's degree course, and a 7 and above, these scores are typically required to work in English-speaking countries in professions such as medicine, law, accounting, and academic research. But as I mentioned, different institutions will take different scores, so do make sure you research and find out exactly what you need in order to apply for your chosen institution or visa. I hope you found this lecture useful and it's given you a good idea of the IELTS exam in general if you didn't know before. If you do have any questions, do leave them in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next lecture.